Likability is a very important criteria in a prospective salesperson. Very important, right? But likability alone is not going to win you the deal. You could say, hey, summarize this, expand this, make it look like I'm an expert at this, change the tonality, make it jovial if it's a speech. I can do a lot of, if it's an email, make it more empathetic, etc., etc., etc.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Corey, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Usman Sheikh. He's the founder and CEO of XIQ, and they are transforming how sales and marketing teams engage with their audiences by leveraging personality-driven insights. This is some really cool tech. So cool, in fact, that they recently earned a spot on Gartner's MarTech vendor list. And before founding XIQ, Usman was the VP of Digital Commerce and Corporate Dev over at SAP. His tenure there spanned 13 years, developing strategies that integrated marketing and sales efforts. Usman, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and be talking to you.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. First question, just to kind of kick things off, help us get to know you a little bit more. What has it been, 2 years since Gen AI really hit the stage? And a lot of people, that's really what they think of when they know AI, but you all have been around for 13 years. So you were really early to the scene. But what was it like back then when you said to people, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to align sales and marketing and, increase their intelligence with AI?
So if you look at ChatGPT, the product that came out is after many, many years of research and machine learning and training algorithms, what happened under the tip of the iceberg, right? All the work that was taking place. Similarly to us, we were spending a lot of time in research and development. And when we broke it down, our inspiration for creating XIQ was to emulate the best practices of the top salespeople. And what we broke that down into was that they had vast networks of connections, people they knew, and these were sources of intelligence for them. So they were constantly getting insights on people and company from there. Second, they knew the industry they were selling into extremely well. So they knew the players, they knew the companies, they knew the politics, they knew the breaking news, and they used that to their advantage. And the third thing was they understood what were the specific personal needs of those individuals that were going to be involved in the decision making. So it's very people heavy if you think about it, right? So we turned to behavioral science, and in behavioral science, you have a methodology called DISC. It's a personality assessment methodology. Similar ones exist in Myers-Briggs and MEDPIC and so on. But this one is around personality assessment. And we used that and we created an algorithm. As a result of all this effort, we had created a platform that had unique insights on people, one comprehensive location for all the company information that you ever wanted, and industries. And you were able to use this to use a large language model and connect all the dots, the people, the company, the industry, your own products, connect all those dots and come up with value-added answers. And that's where XIQ is today.
Wow, that is quite the evolution.
Yes.
And as you say, it's not a simple problem to solve, right? When you're thinking about company data and digesting that, making that actionable, that's one thing. But personality data, especially when we have people that, we might act very differently in a coffee shop than we do on LinkedIn. I think that's changing today, right? More and more. But, even 3 years ago, 5 years ago, certainly that wasn't the case. I was struck by something you said of the 3 big points you made of what top sellers do well. So who actually meets that definition? Because when you're going through that, I'm thinking like, wow, those have to be like the rainmakers, the 1%, or where did you find those people? Like how many people were actually doing those skill sets?
So that's a great point. So that's less than 5%. And so that's what our motivation was. So how can we replicate these best practices? The top sellers have these intuitively built-in practices, right? They know how to network. They know how to ask the right questions, and they know how to do research, right? And that research could be just by picking up the phone and calling, or going to Google, or going to ChatGPT or whatever, and doing the research. So that was an important aspect of their task. And the second thing was understanding people, understanding their needs, custom tailoring their pitch to them, and then the industry. And you're absolutely right. Sales people in large quantities are not up to par with that. So our motivation, our goal with XIQ was to be able to use AI to take these very complex tasks, right? Doing research on a company or even on an individual. If I had to write a personalized email, there's a lot of things I'd like to know. I'd like to know what motivates you. I'd like to know what is your career trajectory. What's in it for you if you were to take my product or solution, right? I'd love to be able to know that. In order for me to get to those answers, I have to do a lot of research. And probably for 9 out of 10 people, I still will not be able to get to do that. But bring AI into the equation and turn it loose on the internet. And suddenly you can get this sort of very, very focused information to tailor in your approach for this individual in seconds. If I were to do it, it would take me hours, if not days, to do, and hence meaning I would never do it. I can now do it in seconds at a very, very high quality. So to your point, it's a story about democratizing those best practices so the next level of the company can step up and perform like the top 5%, right? So that's a huge motivation for us. So if you have a salesperson and you demand that they come in prepared to every sales call, and there's these 10 questions they must know, right? Today, if you were to just open-endedly give them those 10 questions and ask them to go fetch that information, it's very, very time-consuming. And that's time that seller should be spending with a prospect, selling, not researching. In the AI paradigm, these complex 10 questions that I have to research can be pre-programmed. And at a click of a button, all I need to do is enter the name of a company or a person. It will conduct all that research, bring me the answers to those questions in 3 seconds, and help me get prepared on par with the best preparation I need to have for a meeting. That's the game changer, right? Something I was struggling to even catch up. I'm running behind the bus. Instead, now the bus is coming to me and picking me up and briefing me before I even get where I'm going, right?
I love that analogy. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And also, it's huge in, like you say, of helping, no longer chasing the bus, no longer feeling like you're being behind. The bus is coming to you. You have all the data. You have everything you need. It's a mindset shift for one. And when people are running around and they're trying to hit those activity goals, it's also, I would think, a reduction in stress, right? So you would have clearer thinking and more purposeful, buyer-focused thinking on how you're going to approach things. And then one more point that really stood out to me was, not only do you have that, which is huge in and of itself, but then you're giving companies, you already show them what good looks like, right? By that analysis and everything you've built with the machine learning on that top 5%, less than 5%, you have what good looks like. You have the democratization of best practices. When you look at it from the opposite side of things too, when you look at it internally, I think you remove a lot of that friction, especially for new AEs or sellers that maybe aren't hitting that mark or don't have that intuition you mentioned, because we hire for things like charisma, creativity, curiosity, and like a competitive drive. We're like, oh, that's the seller we want. And then we sit them down in a chair and we say, okay, now you're going to be a research analyst. Like you said, now you're going to be a copywriter. Now you're going to be a social media strategist. And oh yeah, by the way, you might get to do what you're good at 17% of the time. I think Salesforce's last stat was 18% of the time, right? It's almost ridiculous. But now we finally have the tech to set them up for that. And Usman, I also really attached to your point when you said that, the currency has changed. I like that. A lot of people say, well, the table stakes, just to get there. But I like the idea that it's currency, right? It's the overarching, like, monetary device. Like, it's not no longer table stakes. You're not sitting down for a game. It's like, this is what permeates our society when we're talking about buyers and sellers. And so as we look at that currency of interacting, the bare minimum you need to sort of play this game with a buyer, How can companies leverage that to get into personalizing the buyer journey?
Yeah, great point. And I think there are a couple of things that I'd like to highlight over here. One is there's a professional persona, right? How we like to be treated in our jobs. And then there's a personal persona, right? My friends, with my family, when guard is down, I'm out of my, I'm in my civilian life, so to speak, and so on, right? So first of all, we're talking about addressing the professional persona. That's very, very important. And here again, even the use of the word currency becomes important because as you just said, as a seller and a buyer, right? The first thing I want to set into place is that it is a commercial transaction. Now, the actual denomination of that currency can change. So one denomination is information that I bring. Another denomination of that currency is ideas that I bring. And then is the value that I can extract, time I can save. Eventually, it starts getting into dollars and cents, right? So if I'm going into a sales environment and I'm using tactics such as inviting them to, hospitality events and so on and so forth, like please come to my, I'm hosting a suite at the Golden State Warriors, come over and visit them and, do this kind of thing. I'm actually, yes, I'm bringing them into a place where I can talk to them in a less guarded fashion, but I'm also setting the wrong expectation. I'm setting the wrong stage for myself. And the stage has to be based on what is the value add I provide to you as a business person. Once that's established, and that's the most established level setting that one has to do, right? And therefore, in order to earn that currency, those denominations of information about people, I need to have tools that can beef me up and bring me there. And that's what our platform helps you do, right? And so I think that behaviorally, you want to set the right expectation with your prospective buyer that, this is something already in the commercial framework. I'm going to treat you like a professional. You treat me back like a professional. And I think that itself sets the stage. And in the absence of having enough professional material to use, people then resort to more emotionalized tactics, become my buddy tactics. And those go only so far, but they don't win you the deal. I think likability, for example, is a very, very, if I'm allowed to say that term even nowadays, right? But likability is a very important criteria in a prospective salesperson. Very important, right? But likability alone is not going to win you the deal, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't want to make enemies with what I'm about to say next. So listeners, please think okay of me. Give me a benefit of the doubt here. But, as a person that does much more buying than selling, I completely agree with you in that friendship factor, the likability factor only gets you so far. Quite frankly, I don't want to go out for a coffee or a beer. I can do that on my own time. I really don't have the time for that. What I have time for is if you're going to help me create a business case for the product I think I need, or if you're going to help me ensure that I get ROI from that product so that I'm not looking for a new job in 6 months, if it's a big enough purchase, that's the crucial factor that I think we need to bring more. So if we're looking at those really fundamental value-based or value-added interactions, are there specific areas where AI can help us make those more impactful?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. So I will go back to what I was starting to tell you that, understanding what are the opportunities for a person. So humans are driven by two major, fear and opportunity, right? So we have algorithms that can help you understand that based on your personality type, your job, your industry, current trends within the industry, these are opportunities that you should be looking at. And these are potential threats that could come up and, kind of disable you from getting to what you wanted to get to, right? So I think that being able to understand that and for sellers to be able to sell on the what's in it for me, for the buyer, right? That's a very, very important thing. And that's where AI can come play a part. All of us want to be told our story. Like, what is my story? How can you, Corey, help me get a better outcome of my story, right? And if I can take you and switch you around to being able to tell Corey his story and say, Corey, your podcast can be really big if you do this and if you invite these kind of people and use this sort of technology, right? And maybe layer it up with something. Then you'll be really, really interested because that's something you do. You spend a lot of time doing it. And here's somebody who's actually showing you how to get better at doing it, right? You'll have time for me for that. Instead, like, hey, Corey, what's the weather like? You want to go out this weekend, watch out the Warriors, right?
I love that too. Like, the what's in it for me is one thing, but you're right on with taking it that step further, and that being able to identify their story and to tell it back to them and to tell them where you fit, right? Where you fit in helping them accomplish what they need to. That's a big mindset shift that I think is going to be impactful for a lot of people. When we think about how AI is going to change things, especially from a salesperson perspective, just in the past few months, I've seen this discourse rapidly change. And this is what I'd love to get your take on, because it seemed 6 months ago where it was, no, everyone's going to be safe. Everyone's going to have a job. It's just going to help you be faster. And then now we're seeing things, on the most extreme side of it, whereas people are saying, well, maybe 60, 70% of sellers are going to be out of a job. Maybe that's primarily on the SDR, BDR front. Other people are saying, well, no, we're not going to lose people. We're just going to amplify and accelerate. We'll have one SDR managing like 50 to 100 AI bots. One AE doing really high value enterprise stuff. He's managing 10 AI bots. So where's your thinking kind of fit in that discourse, and where do you think we'll be, maybe 2 years out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer it this way. If your process is this big, okay, and you're using AI to automate that, then you're out of a job. But in reality, the process is not this big. The process is actually really, really big. The point is, we can only execute this much. And that's the one we know. We don't go in and make our sales guys do SWOT analysis. We don't make them go in and, do all sorts of competitive market intelligence comparison and matrices. We don't have them go and do their ICP comparison analysis. They should do all of that. They should look at the financials of the company. They should understand the stakeholders. When you add all of that up, that process is actually that big. But given the time constraints, given the skill constraint, given the resource constraints, we only do this much. And then those people come and say, oh yeah, we can take that. But no, think about it. If you need to do this job properly, you should be doing all of this. If you're going to do all of this, yes, AI can help you go through all these steps significantly faster, but you now need orchestrators who will be able to do that, right? And I think B2B sales will continue to stay being a human-to-human interaction at the end. There's a lot of qualification that needs to happen, right? So my answer to your question, will it automate? Will it get rid? I think, first of all, let's get the process complete. Let's put the full best practice stacked process in place. Let's streamline that. Let's make that happen. And then figure out, do we really need humans to operate that? Or is it something that is self-operational? And I would venture to say that we will need humans to operate it.
Yeah, I think so too. And when it shakes out, it'll be very intriguing. But I really love your point about, let's just get the process down. And for our audio only listeners out there, we were going from like an inch to a foot. When we're talking about we're only doing X amount, that was the inch, and we need to be doing X amount, that was a foot. So it's a huge jump. And it's something that is near impossible with the activity levels that we expect from salespeople these days, right? And I think the other thing it comes down to is, when you're thinking about all of those tools and the AI and how it can help people get to that step, I'm reminded of a problem that we see again and again when it comes to budget allocations, right? We've seen several big companies that have already kind of done layoffs because they say they want to invest more in AI. Whether that's true or not, or just a convenient story, we'll just take it at face value and look at it. And it reminds me, I was at the I was at a chief sales officer conference about a year ago, back in the spring. And one of the big problems that they brought up is that what sales leaders do is we slash into headcount and we often cut too deep. And then we put ourselves at a tremendous disadvantage when we have to go back and onboard and hire more people. And I can't help but wonder if people or if companies are and leaders are doing that right now with AI, going after the quick cost savings and saying, oh, maybe I don't need to hire a manager if this coaching platform is good enough. Maybe I can get away with 5 SDRs when I used to have 10. So what would you say to those people to really drive home? Because I'm in agreement with you, Usman. I think complete the process first, see what gains you get, and then go from there. What would your advice be to those sales leaders that are tempted right now to cut deep and just go after the quick savings?
Yeah, so I think the root cause of why they're cutting deep is kind of important as well. And I think one of the things you mentioned was that they think that AI is going to come and therefore, and I think that's definitely a factor that people are divesting before the return on investment or before even investing in AI. Because currently it's the same, I've been through the internet thing and, where everybody's like, okay, we're going to do our own little thing. And already a year and a half in, and cycle time is a lot faster with AI as well. We're starting to see these companies come fatigued out. Oh yeah, we wanted to build our own GPT to look at how we could do sales, and we wanted to do it in proprietary, blah, blah, behind the firewall, etc. We wanted to bring our large language model to help us do that. And guys, it is again one of those tactics that's going to divert you. Focus on those vendors whose job it is to get this done. Your job is selling pharmaceuticals or building cars or, selling software or cloud services or security. It's not building sales systems, right, that are going to be automated. So I think one thing is that the reason these divestments in human capital are taking place right now is because of the anticipated value. But I think that it's actually a guise for there's a macroeconomic issue at play. And it's starting to coincide. Let's face it, inflation's been really, really high. Global inflation is very high. Since COVID, supply chain, et cetera, cost structures have changed. And, companies have seen at a mega trend level that when travel was shut down, when Las Vegas was shut down, when all those things were shut down, when going to the office was shut down, salespeople actually performed better, right? And they did better. So instinctively, the CFO woke up one day and said, wait, why am I paying for these guys to go on these expensive golfing trips, right? When they were doing better without it, right? Black and white, right? They're not really looking at the soft touches. But I think, so that's one. And so instinctively, they know that, they do some math around it. But then the looming inflation, let's face it, cost of everything is expensive, right? Cost of hiring labor is getting more expensive. So in anticipation of that, I think people are doing that. They're managing their balance sheets. They want to look good on the Wall Street. So I think you see a lot of that happening. And that is why I think there should be a sense of urgency to look at what purpose-built is, right? Let's cut through the noise, the fog of war. It's too much, everything. I go to my plumber and the guy's got some AI thing going on, right? I go to my gardener, the guy's got an AI tool to look at how he can, improve the quality of the garden, for example, right? Everything is AI these days. So there's too much AI going on. But we need to be careful, what is purpose-built and what is... The other thing that's also important, Corey, with such a huge technological shift as AI, we've got to rethink the processes. And when I say rethink the processes, I'm not necessarily saying shrink the process. I think go back and, again, to your audio listeners, go expand that process, but do it much faster, right? Bring all the best practices for sales preparation and running sales engagement back into the process. But use AI to do what you could not in seconds. And by doing so, improve the game-making capabilities of your seller, right? And that's how you elevate. So right now, given that divestiture has happened ahead of the curve, ahead of the ROI curve, and the cuts are deep, I agree with you, and companies are hurting, very important to get very mindful about what you're selecting as a solution partner. And think of the market that those guys that were pre-internet giants did not necessarily survive. There were new giants that the internet created. And same way, pre-AI giants are not necessarily going to become the post-AI giants. You have to be open-minded about looking at guys who are coming up with new ideas, who have really invested time in thinking about the B2B space and how AI could be utilized in that space.
Yep. I think that's going to be my big takeaway. And I think it's going to be a big takeaway for a lot of our listeners too. The idea of purpose-built and selecting the right tools for the job and then focusing on your process, right? To go back to the Google analogy, you don't need to build a search engine. Go ahead and get on board with what looks like it's going to be the predominant search engine in 10 years from now. No need to build your own learning language models and proprietary. Just skip all that. Focus on the process. Focus on the behaviors you want to see. It's excellent advice. I love it. Okay. And as we move toward the end of the episode here, there are 2 questions that we ask every guest on the show. And the first one is, so as a founder, CEO yourself, probably get a lot of those emails that are, how's the weather? Do you want a Warrior ticket? Do you want to see the game? We already know that doesn't really work. So what does earn time on your calendar and really pique your interest to take a meeting?
No, I'm a nasty guy when it comes to non-relevant, right? So, or cold calls for that matter. So I expect, and I'm going to use the word you use, table stakes, right? So I expect people my story is happily an open book on the internet. You can go into LinkedIn, you can go into any of the social media channels, you can see a lot of stuff about me. So I do that on purpose, as a matter of fact. I am an executive, I am broadcasting, and I'm doing it on a purpose that when I meet somebody who's trying to sell me something, they have used that information and they can come and use that with me. That's what's going to impress me. Now, I went to University of Michigan. I got a call from one seller and they were selling some web service or website development capability. And on that, what they did is they showed XIQ at Ohio State, right? So if you're at Michigan, Ohio State is your worst enemy, right? And now that really got my attention and earned my respect, even though it kind of ticked me off that I was looking at the worst college I could think of. All due, respect to our Ohio State, fans over here. But it earned respect that this guy knew I had gone to Michigan and it was going to get a rise out of me and he would get it. That's what gets your attention. You've got to be, even if it was provocative, I'm still telling you that story 6 years later, right? So that person made the mark. He gets a lot of marks. Those guys that call you up and say, what is your name and what do you do? I have zero space.
Yeah, know your audience. Know your audience. Okay, final question for you is, if there was just one piece of advice that you wanted to end the show on and give to revenue leaders, what would it be and why?
So I think I've already said some of this. We're at a big cross section right now. And when the internet came out, there were a lot of new change managed methodologies that came out. So I don't know if you remember, maybe way before your time, but there's Michael Hammer and James Campy. They wrote a book called Re-Engineering the Organization. It was a bestseller at that time. And it was actually talking about how you have to rethink your processes and your people based on technology innovations. And that was in the mid-90s that this was happening. Fast forward almost 30 years, and AI is coming out. And we need to almost go back and revisit how we are going to re-engineer our sales organization. And so I think that at this stage, 2 things are of matter. I think you should set very ambitious goals in terms of what you expect to achieve. And today, courtesy of AI, that augmented intelligence, those complex and sophisticated goals that you want to achieve are achievable very, very quickly with the right purpose-built solution, right? So I would say, think through, don't just be lazy and leave it to the guys who've done it for the last 30 years to come up with the next 30 years. They're not the ones who invented AI. They're not the pioneers of introducing AI into B2B. They just happen to be the big incumbents in place. And if one thing that SaaS told us was that loyalty is very, easy to shift from one environment to another, And so I think right now is a very, very major time for people to start rethinking what they want to achieve. Set ambitious goals and use purpose-built solutions to help you achieve those goals. That's the only way you're going to do it. If you keep doing the same, you're going to multiply bad with an exponent, and it's going to be really, really bad. If you do the good, you can also multiply the good and do really, really good and accelerate. That's the beauty of where we stand. But you need to realize what time and place this is in history. And, we're the first humans interacting with AI on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big responsibility.
It's simple and powerful. Right? Take a second look, think through it. Okay. Well, that was a lot of fun. Usman, thank you so much for joining us on the show. If people want to learn more, connect with you, where should they go?
So LinkedIn is a great place. It's USMAN, Usman Sheikh. XIQ is the name of the company. That's a great place to connect and follow us on the company on LinkedIn as well. We post a lot of value-added stuff, a lot of thought leadership.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thanks again. And that's it for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.